Might as well start here. Do you think that taxation is theft?
If it's not in the contract between what you've signed with the state, then yes, it is.
I mean, let's be clear about what taxation is then, because if I have like, some sort of business, let's say I go to McDonald's and I
Mhm.
pay for a Big Mac, that's not really
Yeah.
taxation, right? So what are
No.
you defining taxation as here if it could be something that isn't theft?
So how I define it when it's not theft is that you agree to pay the state a sum of money. It has to be agreed between both you and the state.
So I mean, what is the state then? Why am I, why is it not just a firm? Why is it specifically the state?
Because the state provides protection from foreign powers. Um, it can also provide a police force as well, but the private market can do that in a minarchist society. So,
So I mean, like, if I had some company where, they were defending me from foreign powers, would they be a state as well then?
uh, it depends how much autonomy you have under them. So, like, how much autonomy would you have under this business, hypothetically?
I mean, surely if it's voluntary, you'd have total autonomy.
Okay, so what if you break a term of agreement with this business you have?
Well, then there'd be penalty clauses. That's the same for all contract law.
Okay, so do you truly have full autonomy then if you are bound by contract?
Yep, you have full autonomy over your property.
Okay,
But
your property as far as that goes.
but
Okay.
the problem is if I, this is the thing, it's not really possible to break a contract in under title transfer theory, right? It's just that when I violate some penalty clause, I agree to transfer some property to the other party. That's why every contract
Yeah.
is defining. It defines the transfer of title to property. So it's not possible for me to violate a contract, really.
hmm Yeah. So why can't that be the same way between you and the state? You can set up a contract with the state once when you're an adult, and then if you break terms of service or any penalty clause, you could,
Like, I
you
don't
know,
understand what the state is if it's not just some firm.
so the state is like it's like any type of typical state as a governing body. It makes laws and stuff, but the laws have to be within the bounds of the contract you've made.
I mean, is that not
This
the
is
case for
how.
like McDonald's? They make the rules for what happens in McDonald's. If I start stripping nude in the middle of McDonald's, they'll kick me out, right? So
Yeah,
McDonald's a
sure.
state?
McDonald's is an entity that abides by American law, so therefore there's no conflict of interest there. There's no conflict between the federal government and McDonald's because McDonald's does
I
not
mean,
break
do you
anything that
think
the U.S. says.
do you think the US is a just state then? Do you think that because we're looking at the difference
Not
between now
entirely.
just and unjust
Not
states? So yeah,
entirely.
but like,
No.
but so therefore, the US government doesn't have a say over what happens in McDonald's. So, is it not McDonald's who's the state over McDonald's?
But McDonald's still follows the regulations set forth by the state.
Well, I guess we can just leave that for now. We're going to get into a little bit of a
Yeah,
semantics
yeah,
battle
let's.
there. So,
Yeah, yeah.
do you think people have a right to aggress onto other people?
To aggress on other people, no. But people have the right to defend themselves
Sure.
from aggressors.
Do you think people
Yeah,
can delegate rights that they do not have?
rights that they do not have. Can you explain that one a little bit for me, please?
So, like, if I have the right to, I don't know, own a gun, say, let's say that's a right I
hmm
have, would I be
Yeah.
allowed to delegate that right onto another person so that they could own a gun for me, say?
Um. We can go with that. Yeah.
Sure. So, do you think the
Because
state
there's
has a
plenty of
right
time.
to aggress onto others?
I believe the state has to only get intervened when someone is aggressing on someone else that cannot defend themselves. So, like, say if someone has a gun and you don't have a gun and you can't protect yourself, that's where the state gets involved and protects you from the aggressor.
So, I mean, like, I'm just trying to picture what exactly the state is. Is it just some firm where
Yeah.
it is real
The
altruistic
this
and it provides
I
protection to
mean,
everybody?
if we're gonna go like put it in a business sense, then yeah, that's a pretty good description of it. It's the sole government's role is to protect its citizens from internal and external powers. So yeah, it can be like a firm if you want to imagine it that way.
And so it has to. So how exactly would it go about providing protection to absolutely everybody without getting any profits out of it, right? How would it go about doing that? So like
So
how would such an entity form and how would it maintain
mhm.
itself?
Yeah, so how it would maintain itself specifically. So like um if you want to be a citizen, like if you want to live within its territory, let's say, you're going to want that the state will make a contract with you of, hey, you give us this amount of money and we'll protect you. And it'll be with each individual citizen, and it can be negotiated between the citizen and the state. This way, if the state starts getting authoritarian or starts breaking its own terms of contract, the citizen can take the state to court and can get a settlement, especially if they feel the state hasn't protected them. Like, say, if you get robbed and the state doesn't arrive, you can then take the state to court because you feel they aren't upholding their end of the bargain.
So you said if you're in its territory, you're its citizen. So I mean, how are you defining
Yeah.
what the state's territory is and isn't?
The state's territory is like how far it can operate.
I mean, how
They
far it
can be
can
a line.
operate, or
Yeah, yeah. How far? Like it can be like it can relegate itself to like how like the borders are here in the United States between us and Canada. You got
so
the Canadian government, its territory, the American and its territory. So
so
the agreement between two.
if there's some like rising state near me, right, and then they are able to operate on my property that I homesteaded and everything, and they say, hey, by the way, you're now in our territory, you got to sign this contract or leave. Is that really voluntary?
No, that's an opposing state treading on the territory that you live on. So you
So yeah,
can
but it's
you
so it can't be that their territory is whatever they're able to operate over, right?
yeah, okay, more like the where they've it's like they so it's kind of like the separation of power kind of. So you have the state and you have the citizen, and the citizen consents to being ruled by the state. So then that property that the person has consented to the state to be ruled, the state can operate on that land. It could be dubbed as territory.
I mean, what if I don't
It's an, it's,
consent?
it's, an, it's an agreement between the state and the citizen. So in order for the state to protect the citizen, the state has to operate on their land.
So like,
You have
what
to
if I
obtain
just
that consent.
what if I just so if I just don't consent to the state coming over, they aren't allowed to do anything to me.
Unless you trespass on someone else's property that has the state's protection. No,
And
they
then
cannot do anything.
so then they'd be allowed to defend that person.
Yeah.
But then like this is sounding a whole lot like a covenant community.
Eh, it can be. The larger the larger this the population, harder it is to maintain a monarchist state. But that's with every political and governing thought. The same thing. I can say the same with anarcho-capitalism. That's the same. You
No,
know,
that's not my point. It's not about maintenance or anything like that. It's about um like what you're describing here. If it's entirely consensual and it's all based on contract law, that's anarchy.
Mhm. Yeah, but it's minimal. It's minimal anarchy because you're
What do
protecting
you mean
each other,
minimal
and then
anarchy?
if you terminate the contract with the state, it can kick you up and deport you to a different
No,
country.
my point is you're not arguing for statism here. You're arguing for anarchism. That's what
This
you've
is an anarchism. I mean,
what?
in a traditional sense. Now you can argue it can be anarchism, but you still have to follow the terms that you've agreed to for one, and the laws of the state.
Wait, are you saying that minarchism is a form of anarchism?
It's minarchism, what like it's minimal anarchy. That's where you get the name minarchism from. It's minimal and it's not complete anarchy because there's still a state. You have to abide to
Yeah,
its
well,
rules, and you still
if there's
have
a
to pay
state, then it's
taxes to civil
statism. It's
protection.
not anarchism. Anarchism is the
So,
negation of statism.
minarchism is like the halfway point.
It's not a halfway point. It's firmly in statism. It's a binary system. Either you have a state or you don't have a state.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And what
If
you're
you put it
describing
that way,
here, if it's based entirely in natural law, like in contracts and everything like that, that's anarchism.
yeah, yeah. But if you terminate the contract, the state has the authority to deport you to a different country that you wish to move to. Because if you believe, like, say, like the United States had this system, and I'm living in the United States territory, and I terminate my contract with the U.S. Under this system, instead of putting me in prison, instead of locking me up behind bars and treating me like a criminal, it'll be like, okay, where do you want to go to? You want to go to Canada? Do you want to go to Mexico? You want to go to England? And then you'll go to those countries and become a citizen there.
I think you're really misunderstanding what the state is here. The state didn't come to people and decide, hey, do you consent to be governed by me? Here's a contract to sign or anything like that. The
Mhm.
state,
Yeah.
it said, hey, I'm ruling you now.
Yeah,
It's a system of
because the person
rulers.
has consented to be ruled, and then if you want to break away
They didn't,
from
are you,
that system, there's going to be consequences, actions, consequences. If
are you
you
going
want to
down
break
some like
contract,
implicit contract road, like where it's not an explicitly they've had a piece of paper that you signed? Is it like a social contract type of deal?
uh, it can be. I mean, that's what I typically use in these
Well,
arguments. Would be a social contract,
but that's not a
but it
contract,
can
right?
be implicit
That's
as
not a
well.
legitimate contract. The only contracts in natural law are those that transfer the title to property. It has to be explicit thing. There is no such thing as like an implicit contract or a social contract or anything like that.
Mhm.
So so there can't be a social contract, right? So
Okay,
how did the state form itself on a contract basis?
it would come to the person, and you have to sign the agreement. You know, the terms of service, aka the laws that you'd be abiding by under
Do you
the
think this is
state.
how any state has formed ever?
As far as like city states go, no, but small independent countries, yes. Back in the when states were first forming,
Is
it
it,
was an agreement of protection.
you think there was legitimately agreements of protection where people signed contracts, there's no coercion, it wasn't wars or anything like that? You think it was all just hunky dory?
Oh no, there were definitely wars. I mean, one of the way how states expand is through conflict. I'm not
Yeah.
denying that.
But I really think you misunderstand how any states like let's look at the U.S. for example. Do you think the U.S. formed on a contract basis?
Oh no, no, definitely not.
What's some country you think did form in this contract manner?
Contract matter would definitely be Greeks, not Greek city states. It's city states primarily have done this, especially in the medieval era. They did this. It was a small practice. It wasn't common, but it did happen on a small scale basis,
Maybe
especially right after,
there were
especially
places
after
like
the western half of
Cospia,
the.
you know, like Cospia.
Yeah.
I don't consider that a state because it formed, you know, contractually, right? But then, like, do you think there's any modern things that you think are a state, but definitely formed on this contract basis?
Modern day, no.
I mean, this sounds like a weird definition of the state, right?
It
Where
it really is, but being a libertarian and saying that, oh, I want to provide maximum freedom and still have a government there, you know what I mean? It's gonna be a little bit off to what a traditional state is,
I
especially
don't
by
think
the
it's
modern sense.
I don't think it's even like traditional state. I think it's inherent in the definition of a state that it's going to be ruling others. Hence why there's
Yeah,
anarchism is defined as no rulers.
yeah. But under minarchism, it'd be consent to rule.
No,
Want
but
to be a
that's
citizen of
not
a
being
country, you'd
ruled.
have to agree to the country's terms.
Like if you trade with somebody in a contract, you're not being ruled, right? If Crusoe and Friday trade, they aren't ruling each other or anything like that. There's no rulership happening there.
Yeah, because that's business.
Yeah, and if you're saying that your state is forming on contracts, that is
Mhm.
also
Yeah,
just business. That is, there is no ruling
yeah,
happening.
Okay, so when you sign, like, say, like, I am the state and I approach you with a contract, my contract will lay out that, hey, you're giving me consent to rule you. You will obey my laws. These
I
are the
think I
current
don't
laws
think you can
established by the
consent to be
courts.
ruled. I don't think you can consent to be ruled. I think it's a
Yeah,
lot
you
like saying
can.
you consent to being robbed or you consent to being raped. It's a contradiction in terms.
Wouldn't be a contradiction because if okay, so let's say like we live in Kapistan and there's a group of ANCAPs that like, hey, this isn't for us, and they want to form a minarchist state. They can voluntarily do that, and they can do it on a contract basis if they want, and then there'd be nothing else anyone could do because trying to
But the point is, if they're forming it on a
trying to
contract
attack them would
basis,
be
if they're all
yeah, they can
consenting
do
to
it.
it, there is no ruling happening. Because ruling, you have to impose rules on another person. I cannot
Yeah,
impose something on somebody who accepts it.
you're consenting to become a citizen of their country and to follow their rules. This would be lined out in
Yes, but then
the
that's consent, so you're not
contract.
being ruled by that person. You're agreeing to go along with the rules. You're not being ruled by
That
them.
person has set up.
Correct, but like
Okay, then. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere.
but the
We're getting
McDonald's
somewhere.
manager isn't ruling me because I agree to not strip down naked in the middle of his shop. He isn't ruling me there.
But if you agree to live on his land and follow his rules, then yeah, he'd be ruling you.
This is no, that's not what ruling means. Ruling means you have to impose the rules on the other person. It's anarchism when everybody's
Who says
consenting.
it has? Who says that it has to be forceful all the time?
That's what ruling means. That's what it means to rule something.
Oh, there's definitely been rulers where people are not tyrannical, that weren't tyrannical, that didn't cause any wars, that didn't cause any violence, that
That,
actually pardons a lot of criminals that did nothing wrong in the first place.
that's a lot like saying.
Those,
That's a lot like me saying that there were many rapes where both parties consented. No, there were no rapes where both parties consented because that's within the definition of
well,
rape.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and it's within the definition of a ruler, and they
If
must
both parties
rule
consent
another.
to having sex, they're both having sex,
Yeah,
consensual sex.
and let's look at an
So,
example, right? Let's say Crusoe and Friday they trade fish for coconuts, right? Are
mhm.
any of them ruling the other person?
Where are you going with this?
I'm trying to get at the fact that when you have a consensual trade, mutually beneficial trade, there is no ruling. It doesn't make sense to denote either person as the ruler because they're both agreeing to terms of the contract.
Yeah, and to put this in lines with the state, and what I'm trying to say is that between a person and a person, fine, but between a person and a government, it's going to be slightly different than your traditional
I mean,
contract.
contracts can only be done interpersonally. You can't have you can't have a contract with a group of people. You can only transfer the title of property to a single other
You can have
person.
a contract with McDonald's
No, you can't.
for a deal.
You can't have
No.
a contract with McDonald's. Not really. You're trading with a single person in every single deal. That's the only way contracts can work.
Mm-hmm. Right. At the end of the day, right? Anarchism is minimal anarchy. So there's going to be a contract involved between the states and the person who's given consent to be ruled by the states.
I just explained
Right?
what it's the case that I can only have a contract with one other individual. Do you see why that's the case? I can't have a contract with
Yeah.
a group of people, right? So I couldn't have a contract with the state. It's all the same
So,
contracts.
what if people voluntarily come together and form a state, and then they say,
I
"Hey,
think
if
that's a
you want to be a
contradiction in
citizen, if
terms.
you listen, it's an agreement that you're going to follow their laws. You're going to follow what they say, and you will have a say in it, but you will have to follow the laws they've already passed.
Okay,
Okay,
but
that's literally all this contract will be.
right. But if it's
Yeah. Okay.
if it's entirely consensual, then it's anarchist. It's just a firm, right?
Who
Because
said it? Who said monarchy is anarchist? It's minimal, yes.
no.
It
I'm
can still have
saying
a
this is
state.
not
There's still have a power
minarchist.
there.
I'm saying
If
it.
you break
You're
the
not
law.
describing a minarchy here. You're describing an anarchy.
Yeah, so like say like I break the contract, the law. Okay, this violates our contract, so therefore I will have to give up my freedom of movement to be stuck in a prison cell because I broke the law. I was convicted of it.
You're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying that when it's all based on contracts, when it's all consensual, you haven't got any ruling happening, so you've not got a state. I'm not disputing that you can consent to these things, that you can consent to, I'll agree by these rules, and if I don't, then this penalty happens, I agree that you can consent to that stuff. I'm saying that when in consenting, it's not a state. You're not being ruled.
You are.
Okay, right,
You're
so can we go
agreeing to
down
be ruled.
my line of questioning to show why trades aren't ruling? Can we do that?
Sure.
So Crusoe and Friday, they trade coconuts for fish. Is either party ruling the other one there?
No.
Okay, what if Crusoe says, hey, I'll only trade you these coconuts if you agree to do a little pirouette, you agree to spin around? Is one party ruling the other there?
Yeah.
Who's ruling who?
Because in order for this contract to succeed, one person has to commit to do something. The person does not have to do anything.
What?
Yeah, so like if you put this in terms of like a state and say, hey, you have to
Let's
I don't
just
know,
stick to
let's
this
say,
contract right now, so we can get the simple
all right,
case done first. So
sure.
Crusoe and Friday, they're trading. Crusoe says, "I'll only do the trade if you agree to spin around once."
Mm-hmm.
Who is ruling whom? Is anyone ruling anyone?
Yeah.
Who's ruling who then?
So the one that's making the other do the pirouettes in order for the trade to exchange.
Okay, so why is he the ruler?
He's the ruler because he is, in order for him to provide what the other person wants to be provided, he is having him do something that has nothing to do with the exchange, but he wants him to
What do you
do
mean
it
it has nothing to do
anyways.
with the exchange? How'd you figure that out?
Can you repeat that question?
How do you know it has nothing to do with the exchange? How'd you work that out?
Because in order for the exchange to happen, he has to do that first. It's not
Yeah.
during the exchange. He has to do it
No,
beforehand.
it's all during the exchange because it's all defined in the contract.
He has to do X in order for Y to happen.
He has to do X or else.
He has to do the pirouettes in order
He also has to give over the
for
fish.
the trade to continue.
He also has to give over the fish. Let's look back at the previous scenario where he has to give over the fish if he wants the coconuts. Did that have nothing to do with the trade?
He has to have the fish in the first place. Now, him
Okay,
getting the
yes.
fish
I,
has nothing to do with the trade, but him
right.
exchanging the fish with the coconuts is a trade.
Yes, and him exchanging the fish with the coconuts and doing a pirouette, that's also a trade. Because there's a contract involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like saying, hey, I'll trade you my coconuts for your fish if you put a little cross on one of the fish. And trade that with, and then we can trade, right? Is he ruling there?
Okay, yeah, I see where you're getting. I see where you're getting at. So you're getting at that as long as it's just a trade, it's just an exchange of goods, rather than an exchange of citizenship and laws. It is not. No one is ruling each other unless those are involved. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Because
nobody's ruling each other in a trade.
okay,
And because
so
contracts can only be the basis of trade, no system of contracts could ever involve rulers.
yeah, but then okay, so how about this? So you want to have this person's property, right? You want to live on this plot of land that's owned by someone else. That's owned, let's say, rather than the state. Let's say it's someone, like a landlord, let's say, and you want to live here. And so he comes here for the contract and like, hey, sign this, but you have to follow my rules. Okay? Then you can live here however long you want. There, I may have to pay me 5% of what you make. So is there a ruler involved there?
No ruler involved there, correct?
Oh, so there's no ruler involved. We have to follow his rules, and his rules are subject to change, just like how a country's rules is subject
There's
to
no
change.
ruler because it's his property, and I am agreeing to live there under those terms. No rulers. Just as, I'll take an analogy. Hey, I'll only have sex with you if you agree to do the dishes. I'm not ruling that person when I give that offer, because I own my body. I'm allowed to use my body however the fuck I want. I can refuse sex whenever the fuck I want, and I'll refuse sex if the other person doesn't do the dishes. I'm not ruling that person, though.
You cannot refuse to whatever new agreements that come up here, because the government changes rules, it changes laws all the time. So when that changes, you'll have to go with it, and if you disagree with it, you'll.
And if I want the person to also start doing the dishes, if I want them to do the dishes and take out the trash every day, right? Or else I'll stop having sex with them. I can also do that. I'm not ruling them though.
Okay. I can see your point. And I may have flaw in my thinking, but you're so like under a night watchman state, which is the type of minarchist I am. You pay the government for protection from thieves, from robbers, and from foreign powers. So the state has to engage in diplomacy both domestically and abroad. A company typically doesn't do that, and with no higher authority, corporations.
They typically don't do it now because the state monopolizes those functions.
Because it's the states.
Yes, and the state is a monopolist. It is violent.
In the past, in the past, so have you ever heard of the Congo Free State? It was
Nope.
owned by Belgian King Leopold II.
Oh, I don't think it was owned by him. I think they conquered it.
Yeah, well, he conquered it, and then Belgium didn't want it as a colony, so he privatized it, and
but I don't think he owned it. Ownership is normative. If he owned it, he'd be allowed to do whatever the fuck he wanted with it. I don't think he owned it.
And guess what? He did.
He possessed it. He didn't own it.
So what's the difference between owning and possession then? Because as far as like historians have debated this and have agreed that he owned it. He conquered it under
those
Belgium's
historians are
flag,
wrong, right?
And then Belgium didn't want it, so he.
Let's take the scenario. I'm wearing a watch right now. If you came along and you took my watch and you stole it and you started wearing it, you won't suddenly start owning it because you're wearing it. It's still my watch. I paid for it. It's mine, right? The fact that you are currently possessing it doesn't mean you own it.
Yeah. But he owns this. He owned this piece of land and.
No. I'm saying he didn't own it. He did not own it.
But he did.
No, he didn't.
He did. Historians.
Okay, do you accept my watch scenario?
Conclusion that he privately owned the region.
Those historians, all of them, are wrong. Okay, none of them understand contract law.
You're saying the National Geographic is.
Yes, they're wrong. They don't understand property rights.
They're wrong.
Yes, they're wrong. So, take my watch scenario. You steal my watch. Do you suddenly start owning that watch?
I can get away.
So you think people start owning a thing they've stolen if they can get away?
I mean, if you really think about it, off of the officially no, but off of a technicality, you can.
What technicality?
It's a very, very slippery slope, and I tend to.
You can get away with stealing it, but you never start owning it, because ownership would imply you're allowed to do whatever you want with it. It's your property. You have the just say over how it's used.
Mm-hmm.
This is a complete abdication of natural law.
Leopold did the same thing with the Congo.
No, you're being criminal when you steal that watch and you continue to use it against the owner's wishes. I don't stop owning that watch at any point. Like, if I saw you walking down the road and I said, hey, that's my watch, do you think, no, in fact, it's your watch because you had it for long enough?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does it?
Yeah.
At what point does the ownership transfer from me to you?
Ownership transfers from me to you from. It depends on how long it's been taken, and because if you like, you can pursue me for the watch, but if the second you stop pursuing me, just be like, okay, he has it. I'm just gonna go get another watch and call it a day. I own it.
Why do you own it
Now,
then?
if
Was there a contract?
there wasn't.
Okay, so if there was no contract, there was
Not
no trade.
everything's contract.
But then there was no
Everything's
trade,
contract.
so how on earth
But,
did the ownership transfer from me to you?
Looked away from his watch a little bit too long.
No, but how did the title of that property transfer from me to you though? If it wasn't a trade, how was it?
It was stolen.
And you think theft transfers the title of property?
The person stops chasing property, yes, because there are laws here in the United States.
Why is murder bad? Do you think
listen,
murder's bad?
murder is bad when you take another life. Yes, murder is bad.
Why is that bad though?
It's just taking someone's life, and life cannot be transferable.
Okay, but why is it bad though? Because the second I kill you, you're no longer pursuing me by definition, because you're dead. So you're no longer pursuing me for the crime that I committed against you. So what's the problem?
The problem is you just put someone in the ground 6 feet under. You treaded
But
on
why is that a problem?
and you killed them. You brutally killed them.
But why is that a problem? Why is that illegal in the natural law sense? Why is that a violation of rights?
Because the person did nothing to be killed over. There was no provocation over rights. If anything, the person
I did
was
nothing to
trying
have my
defend
watch
themselves.
stolen from you. But the second I stop pursuing you for stealing my watch, suddenly it's your watch. So the second I claim your body is my property, I can do whatever I want with it. I shoot you in the head.
You're fine with slavery,
you're no longer.
Slavery, then.
You're not. No, I'm saying you're fine with slavery.
You claim my body, you claim my life.
I'm saying your property system is fine with slavery, right? I'm saying your property system is fine with. So I claim your body is mine, and then I shoot you in the head. So I've stolen your body from you, and then I've shot you, so you cannot pursue me. Right? So what is the problem there? It was my property because you stopped pursuing me. So I'm allowed to do what I want with it. So I'm allowed to shoot you. So therefore, there's no problem with murder.
You can stop the robber, yes, and if that results in the robber's death.
No. I'm saying I am robbing you of your body, and I shoot you in the head.
That breaks that is murder.
I know it's murder,
There's
but
no way to justify murder.
You said theft transfers the title of property. I've stolen your body, and you're no longer pursuing me.
You're saying that I am property then.
I'm saying every single person is property.
Am I correct?
Everyone's property, yes, self-ownership. Everyone has to be property, because your body is scarce. So therefore we need property in bodies.
This is where you and I are going to start disagreeing a lot more.
It's by definition, that's the point of property.
If you follow this, King Leopold was correct, and because he claimed ownership to all the bodies.
I really think we should stick on this right now, because I've reduced your property system to absurdity, which is the property system that you are looking to use to justify that King Leopold owned that.
And this can this system that I've described can
your property system
in an anarchist society. It can prop up in an anarchist society. I
don't think you understand what the purpose of property is. Property is, we need property for conflict avoidance. It arises out of the need for conflict avoidance. That's what property is for.
There's always a need for property too.
Okay,
but plenty of homeless people out there that wants property.
You're really misunderstanding what property means. Every single human has property. Every single human that has ever existed has property. It's not just talking about houses.
I know.
So
in order to build a house, you have to own land.
You really don't understand what property means in this sense. We're talking natural law here, right? So property is about conflict avoidance.
Let's get practical here, okay? Let's get.
It's nothing about practicality here. I'm talking about your theory
Why,
here, your theory of
why no
property.
practicality? Because I formed
Because we're
my
talking
theory
about
off of
your theory
practical.
of property right now, okay? And your theory of property
Theory.
cannot avoid conflict, therefore is a bad theory of property, by definition.
Then, practically speaking, works.
What do you
No,
I,
you have to
I
own
have no
land,
clue
and
what
then
you
in
mean
order
by
to have
that, and I don't
protection,
care
you need to
much.
either have a
So,
protection agency or
do you
the
do you
government
accept that your
protect you
theory
on
of
your land.
property allows for murder? Do you accept that?
No, because
Why doesn't
murder
it?
is bad, and if you kill someone, you killed a quote unquote property as far as you go, and then that person is liable to go to court. Life is not the same thing as something that is not living.
So, right.
A
In
watch
the
is not
watch
alive.
in the watch scenario, you said when you steal my watch, the title to that property transfers to you, so you now own the watch, right?
I won't need the top because you
Okay,
can
right.
find me
That's correct.
say you
Under your property
stop
system,
pursuing me.
is that
Say you
correct?
stop. Say if you stop pursuing me, and then okay, off of a technicality, but officially it's still yours. So they say we come across in a public space. You then re-pursue me and take possession of the watch back. You and under minarchism, you can put me under arrest. You can stop pursuing me and have the police do the rest of the work,
Okay,
and
but
they'll
we're
pursue
not
me
talking
for
about
you.
we're talking about the pure theoretics here of who actually owns it, because that's objectively true.
We
Somebody
need
has to own
practicality.
it.
We can debate. We can
Okay, right.
listen.
But right now we need to get over the
We can
theory.
debate philosophy, okay? Because I could tell. Listen, I'll say that
Yeah,
right
if we
now,
can
okay?
debate philosophy, let's do it, right?
Your
So somebody has to own it.
philosophy is listen.
Do you see
Your
why somebody
philosophy,
has to own it?
a philosophical scale, has no practical use in today's world.
Okay, right. We can apply. We could
I
try to.
base everything off of practicality.
Okay, right. Once we have the philosophy worked out, we can try to apply it to the real world then, and we'll see if it applies. Do you agree? Can we do that?
Sure, we
Okay,
can do that.
so
I
when
like
when you
debating
have
the real world.
successfully stolen my watch and I'm no longer pursuing you, you own the watch. Is that correct?
I'll get caught. Yeah.
Okay, right. So you own the watch once I have stopped pursuing you.
Till I
So,
get caught. Correct.
what do you mean till you get caught?
Because police, whether it be public, or you can hire someone to come after me and take the watch back.
But why? Because you own the watch now. You're allowed to do with it what you want. So would they be stealing it back?
Off of a
Okay,
technicality.
right. I really
Off of a
don't like you using
technicality.
the word technicality here because you're being not being very technical with your property theory. Who actually owns the watch? I'm not talking about who possesses it or who has proximity to it. I'm talking about who owns it. The owner is the person who has the just say over its use. That is the owner. That's what ownership means. So who owns it under that definition of ownership? You or me? It's one or the other. Flip a coin if you want.
You officially still own the watch, no matter if
Okay,
it's stolen
so
or not.
I still own the watch.
Technically,
All right.
yeah. You
So
can still pursue
therefore,
me.
King Leopold, he doesn't own the land. It was conquered. He doesn't own it.
Like the concept of land back then was very different as the concept of land today.
I don't care what people thought land was. Right? I don't care what they
Yeah, but
thought
we
it
gotta
was.
understand people's thought
Property,
lines. 'Cause thought
natural law
lines
never
leads-
changes.
It has over history.
No. Natural
Theory
law
of
never
property
changes.
of
Logic
what
doesn't
property
change.
has changed.
Maybe the perception of it has changed. That is irrelevant. It's always been the case that it's been illegal to murder. It's always been the case that it's been illegal to rape. It's always been the case that it's been illegal to tax.
Yeah.
All these things have always been illegal. They always will be illegal. Whatever is a crime always has been and always will be a crime. Non-aggression doesn't break down over time. It's not like it used to not be true and now it is true, or it used to be true and now it isn't true. It either is true or isn't true. Always, for all of time. Praxeology doesn't change throughout history. Do you see that?
has, especially when we look into the African American slave trade.
Christ. That was a
I'm
crime.
sorry, but I'm sorry.
That was a crime. It was a crime back then. It was a crime
Yeah,
now.
that was a crime,
Oh,
but
yes.
there's nothing back then. No authority, no government, and no person for the longest time
It's entirely
not
irrelevant
have the
whether
authority or
anybody
right to stop them.
enforced. It's entirely irrelevant whether anybody enforced the law. It's still the law. This is natural law. It's based on conflict avoidance. It's still true back then that that was an initiation of
But
conflict and
natural
thus
law
illegal.
didn't end the practice. Practical law did.
What do you mean by
And in
practical
paper.
law? How do you define practical law?
Law that has been passed by executive government or state or some form of authority.
If I call myself the executive government, can I start passing laws?
Oh, it's an organization you have to be a part of.
Okay, but how does such a thing organization form? Divine right of kings or something like that?
And not divine right. You have to form a government.
Okay,
And,
but
I
how do I
mean,
do
you
that?
can.
Right now, I
It
want
has
to
to
start
be
passing some laws.
has to
How
be
do
a
I form a
has to
government?
be a coalition of people, and you have to be able to rule over land.
Okay, so if I get somebody else in chat to agree to be a government with me, and then we, make a couple spears and we stand in a circle and we're ruling over this land, can we start passing laws?
Once you rule the land that's not under any contention with another state, then yeah, go
I
to
mean,
Bertuel if you want. Bertuel, no one
okay,
claimed
so
it, so you can
what
go
if
there.
what if we claim right? We've got our spears now, and we rule the entire planet Earth. Suddenly, every single square inch of land on Earth is in conflict with us and somebody else. That mean no single government on Earth is valid anymore. None of them can make laws.
And you have to you will have to then fight you'll have to fight every single state that is in existence before your claim.
Sure,
It would
they
become
can come
legitimate.
to us with our spears. We've got our spears though, and therefore every single square centimeter of state land on Earth is in conflict with another state, right? So you can't decide between them which state is legitimate. So no state can make laws under under your definition.
But say if I go to Bertuel, which is not claimed by any state, that will be a legitimate claim, and I won't have to fight anyone for it because both Egypt and North Sudan don't want it. If you look at both of their net maps side by side,
So do you think it's just when, like, let's say right now I claim Alpha Centauri. There's currently no government there. If I claim that, is that mine?
never heard of that. Is it a part of any land claim
It's a
that a
planet.
state has?
No state at all currently claims Alpha Centauri. I just started claiming it
Go
though.
ahead and claim it. Go ahead
Okay,
and
so
claim it
does
and
that
form a
belong to me
government.
now?
Yeah. No one's there, correct?
Okay, what if I just claim every single piece of land that nobody has claimed yet? Over the entire universe. Does it all belong to me now?
Yeah. As long as you can defend said claim, yes.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it can be yours.
why does it depend on whether I could defend a claim, whether I own it? Because ownership is the
Because
just say over how something's used, right?
yeah,
If I go
right.
up and rape a woman, she can't defend her claim over her body. Does that mean she doesn't own herself anymore?
No, it doesn't. So here's the thing. So like
But why?
when people come into conflict over land property, not your body type of property.
What's the difference, though?
Okay, so say like you buy your piece of land and you get some money from the bank and you're unable to pay it back. The bank can then kick you off of your property and you're basically homeless now because your land claim to your property has been usurped by the bank.
Okay, but what's
Also
the
can happen
actual
with nations. Like look at Ukraine and look at Russia currently fighting over East Ukraine.
what's
This
what's
is a pretty good example.
what's the actual principal difference between land and a woman's vagina, though?
Is because land is what someone lives on. Your body you live in.
But why does that matter? What's the
It
principal difference there?
matters. It matters because Keeping someone is significantly different than taking someone's land. If you lay
But why is it
land
different?
down and call it a woman,
What
this is
what difference
completely
is
illogical
there
here.
that makes it an actual principle difference? What principle detracts these two things?
That one you can buy, the other you cannot.
But why?
Why? But why? But why? This has been a universally accepted thought process.
Not
Here,
universally
Zulu.
accepted. I am currently rejecting it right now. So what is the principal difference between the two?
One's living and one is not, and we have a higher moral standard for the other.
So so one's living and one's not. Why is the fact that one is alive and one is dead? Why does that mean you can have property in one but not in the other?
Because there's a sense of morality around the surviving person.
Do you think morality is
This is-
objective?
That's up to conversation.
Sure, but
I am a Christian, so
if morality is not objective, then this is just your personal preference that you think there can't be property in people, but there can be property in land. Actually, real quick, do you think we can have?
property.
Do you think a person can own a pet?
Someone can own a pet because
Okay, but so then there can be property in living things. So what's the principal difference now?
The principal difference is that there's less of a moral claim to like a dog, a human owning a dog compared to a human owning.
This is all entirely arbitrary. Then there is no principle that you derived this from. You just said, "Well, I kind of feel like this is different."
There's also anti-slavery laws too.
We're trying to define the law, right? So you can't.
Well,
you
owning
can't
someone
defer.
breaks the law.
You can't defer to the law in order to define the law. It's circular.
Someone in my chat has a question for you. Yes, how was any country founded?
They were all founded through conquest.
What if no one owned the land? No one owns it. No conflict, right?
Yep, there can't be conflict over something somebody doesn't own.
After the fact.
What?
So say I go to Bertwell, which is between Egypt and North Sudan. I claim it, I form a government.
What do you mean you claim it?
I
don't think ownership is defined by what you claim. I think you have to homestead it.
Well, no one owns it, so there's no way for me to buy it.
Okay, but you can homestead it.
Yeah, but homestead it under whom's authority? Egypt's authority or Sudan's authority?
Under natural law. You don't need anyone's authority to homestead.
I mean, if it floats your boat, you can homestead it if you want, but I'm going to take the speed route, claim it.
Okay, but then you don't own it. You don't own it by claiming it.
It's my territory now.
How do you think ownership is defined?
This is where practicality comes in.
Ownership is defined as the just say over how to use something, right? So that little word "just" in there. That's speaking of natural law.
No one living in Bertwell, I have.
So yeah, you can go homestead it.
I'll have say.
Appropriate from nature.
And I will make it country. Now the conflict that you proposed a few minutes ago, where there's still conflict under nothing over something that's nothing.
What?
Egypt and Sudan may not like me setting up a country there and being a real country.
If you don't own it, if nobody owns it still, then there cannot be conflict over it. You can only have conflicts over things that are owned.
So I've claimed it. I've owned it.
No, it's not your property yet. You don't own it.
No one to buy the property from.
That's irrelevant. You can homestead it.
It's two neighbors.
You need to appropriate something from nature. Currently, that beer to wheel is in nature. It is land in the economic sense, right? It is in nature. So somebody has to appropriate it from nature before it can be traded.
Okay. I'll make sandbags out of it because it's one big desert.
Sure, make some fucking sandhills. Do what you want. That's homesteading, right? So once you've homesteaded it, then there can be conflicts over it.
I mean, in order there to be a nation, I kind of have to be there to rule it. But Zulu. So
I mean, what ruling is happening?
Well, currently, if it starts off with one population, I'll be ruling myself. But then more people can.
You'll be imposing rules on yourself, will you?
I mean, if I'm the only one there, I mean,
Imposing rules on yourself.
hey, countries
So,
sometimes
so
don't
when I
have
decide
one or
to
two.
stand up and walk down to get some coffee or something, am I imposing all those rules on myself that I must do this? There's quite a warped ontology, isn't it?
I know, but not a lot of
This
people
is,
want
this
to
is
move to
why I
the
think your
sandhill.
definition of ruling is absurd. If one can rule themselves.
I mean, there is self-determination.
Okay, but that's not ruling. You're not imposing anything on yourself.
It can be interpreted as it. We can have some fun here.
We're speaking of natural law here, buddy. This is I'm
Yeah,
ruling
but
myself. Can I come into conflict over the use of myself with myself?
I mean, you can't have conflict with yourself.
Yeah. So how on earth can I possibly rule myself?
Hey, world peace. Everyone's a country.
Based?
Jokes aside. Yeah. So, jokes aside, no matter whether you homestead virtual or you claim it to form a nation state, and let's say there's no conflict, and the whole, as far as nations go, the world is fine with it. Go there, I start building infrastructure, I build homes, and then conflict starts. That is no longer conflict over the land; that is over conflict of me being there between either Egypt or Sudan. We agree so
So
far?
there's conflict over the use of your body with Egypt and Sudan.
The use of me being there doesn't have to be over my body, but
I mean,
sure,
it's the
we can go with
location of your
this.
body. That's the conflict there. I
Yeah,
don't
it's the
think.
location of not only just my body, but it's what I am doing with it.
Yes, so what you're doing with it, so it's the conflict over the use of your body.
My body bird to will.
No? So the conflict is over
Okay.
bear to wheel, not you.
It's over bird to will, but as conflicts is over bird to will, but because I'm ruling bird to will.
I don't think you're ruling any. Am I ruling this beer can right now? Is that what I'm ruling? I'm ruling
Is
it.
the beer can land?
I know it's property.
There's a significant difference between land claim and a beer bottle claim,
What's
or
the difference
owning
there?
land,
They're both
land
they're
the
both
property,
non-living.
and
I'm telling you
beer
right now.
can the property. Can you
I
live on the beer can?
I'm telling you right now. They're both non-living, so you can't pull that card. And you
I know.
already
I'm
accept that
saying
you can own
what I'm
animals.
saying is, can you live on the beer can? Can you
Uh,
build a house on the beer can?
don't think I could. Maybe a very very small house, but why does that matter?
Because this is really the concept of like land, like dirt
See,
of the
this is
earth
this is
land.
this is why you need to be careful with your wording again, because when you're speaking about property claims and economics in general, anything to do with praxeology,
We
when you
haven't even talked about
when
economics
when
because you and I tend
when you
to,
when you
of
talk
course,
about
being capitalists, we
when you
agree.
talk about land, right? When we're speaking of these things, when we're speaking of property law, land is something that's unowned. It can be analogized to just nature. This is why like a lot of baby Georges, you can catch them out by saying, well, why is the land value tax? Why is it only on land and not on my table, right? And then they're like, oh, I don't know. An experienced Georges will come out saying, no, your table, that was also made from land. The tree that you felled, that was land. Land is everything
Yeah, but
unowned.
it's been
Rivers
returned.
are
But
land,
that
oceans are
land,
land,
that
fucking air is land. Anything that's scarce and is not
I
currently owned
stand
is
on.
land.
So you're saying if I jump out of an airplane, I'm not going to fall through the air because I can walk on it?
You very much misunderstood what I said there. So
Like,
the
yeah.
distinction in property law is everything is either land or property. It's property when it's owned, it's land when it's unowned. Everything scarce is either land or property. It has to be one or the other. Air,
So it
that's land.
has, no matter what, it has to be scarce.
If it's not scarce, it cannot be owned. I don't really think it matters if you call it land or not. I suppose you could call it land when it's non-scarce. Doesn't make big of a difference, but yes, you can only have property in scarce things, I should say. Then
Okay. So where does this go as far as with state owning land?
As far as the
than
state owning
you
that, I don't
having
think
to
it
be
does.
imposed by the state. Because we're getting pretty philosophical here, and I don't like debating philosophy because I like debating practicality.
We can do practicality if you want. Do you think monopolies or competing firms are best at delivering products and services?
Yes, competition is good.
Okay, so we'd want total competition in everything.
Economically, yeah.
Okay, so we'd want competition in rights enforcement, right?
Ah, okay, I see where you're going with this. Very clever. Um, rights enforcement, I mean, there can be multiple different courts. Yeah.
But we want competition in it, so we wouldn't have just a monopolist in rights enforcement, would we?
No. Like there's private courts here in the. They can be private courts, public courts,
Mm,
private
yeah, but the
courts.
top level is always monopolized, isn't it? In the US, they have a monopoly on the top
Unless
level
it's
of arbitration.
unless they're hired by the state to be the
Mm,
highest.
Supreme Court, that's the highest level of arbitration in the US. It's monopolized.
Yeah, in the
There
U.S.
aren't two Supreme
Say
Courts.
if it was a smaller state and we needed to hire private court to help with the overflowing cases, can do that.
But what's the top level?
Well, they'd be hired to be a part of the top level, so it'd still be the Supreme Court. They'd
But
just be an
if they're being
extension of it.
hired, right, that they're only operating so long as the state allows them to operate. The state can just go,
Yeah,
now you're out. So the state's still
yeah.
monopolizing it, right? They're just having a subsidiary now.
Yeah, but they're picking out
That's not competition.
the best court out of all the other courts.
If if
Higher
if Walmart
the
owned
private sector.
every single supermarket in the entire US, but it still kept them as separate brands, right? You know, you still had Walmart and Goodwill or whatever. You know, it still had the Goodwill sign outside, but Walmart still owned it. That's still a monopoly. You know,
So
if
there's
there
a
aren't
difference. There's a difference between
if I can't come along and say, hey, I want to start up a supermarket as well, without Walmart say so, Walmart's still a monopoly, right? And if I can't start my own Supreme
so to
Court without the
you.
Supreme Court say so, that's a monopoly.
Okay. So as far as you go, I guess we should have clarified this earlier. Do you believe that government is a company, or do you believe companies can be governments?
By government, I assume we're talking about the state.
Yes.
So the state is a criminal entity. It is the organization of the criminal ruling class. If, in a short definition, I can give you my long definition if you want.
That's completely up to you if you want to give me the long one or not.
I think Rothbard's definition can probably suffice for now. I do have a improvement on this, I think. Murray Rothbard defines the state as that institution which possesses one or both, almost always both, of the following properties. It acquires its income by the physical coercion known as taxation, and it asserts and usually obtains a coerced monopoly on the provision of self-defense services, police, and courts over a given territorial area. So I narrow this down into a state is a self-asserting monopoly over some area, right?
Mm-hmm. So but if it's a state, there's going to be just one state in the country. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I can say there is competition between states. It's not domestically, it's foreignly. There's competition between the United States government and the government of Moscow right now over Ukraine.
Oh my.
That itself would be competition by and large.
That's not
Correct.
really competition because they're not competing within the same market. They're just two separate markets.
Both competing over Ukraine.
Like if
And Biden is currently going to send troops to Ukraine, I believe. Or
sure, so
he's contemplating to.
they both want to have Ukraine under some certain jurisdiction. That's irrelevant.
Yeah. So they're
It's still
competing for the same
monopolies.
thing.
Right now, Ukraine is monopolized by the Ukrainian government.
The Ukrainian government is in a bit of a pickle between Russia
Sure.
and the
So
United States is coming in to help.
if
The European Union is
Russia
getting
engages in
involved.
some conquest and they take over Ukraine, then the area which once was Ukraine will now be under the monopolistic jurisdiction of the Russian government.
Yeah, but it's an illegitimate claim. So
I
they
know.
can,
It's a state.
yeah, so
Of
they can
course it
go
is.
back and Ukraine, with maybe the help of some others, if they choose to enlist their help, can go back and take back your Crimea.
Do you think private property owners can take back their land from all these states roaming around then?
They definitely can, but considering
Okay.
that the armor power and the military power of
So
Russia,
how
a
about
bunch
we
of
actually
citizens may not be able to be enough to get
how about we circle back around to the
down.
question, which was, is the free market or monopolization the best at delivering products and services? Which one do you think it was? I think you said it was free market, right? It was competing firms are better. So we'd want competing firms.
Yeah,
We'd
and
want competition
there's
in rights enforcement, wouldn't we?
and there are private militaries you could hire. I mean, Ukraine's already done
Aye, but
that.
I mean, competition in rights enforcement. That's a pretty good definition of anarchy right there. And if that's
I mean, this is
better
like
than statism, sorry, buddy.
anything. Any word can sound better than statism.
But you're a statist.
Oh, when you put it that way, all of a sudden I'm hurt.
I mean, you've just admitted that your ideology is inferior to mine.
Philosophically, but in the pragmatic, I see
So in
and
the
a
pragmatic,
and Kapistan.
it's all about practicality, right? So practically, do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think monopolies
practical.
are
Yeah,
superior?
practically, I believe minarchy will come about from a anarchist state because people over history, even when we had no government, still formed governments.
So let's
Or
talk about
they formed
practicality then. How much rights enforcement is your state providing to each individual?
equal amount of right
Yeah, but how
ability. You know,
much? Like, am I getting a tank and two armed guards, or am I getting like a pistol? Right? How much are they providing? You know, those are two extremes. Where one extreme
yeah.
it just buys a pistol for everybody. The other extreme it's giving everybody a tank and a bunch of armed guards, right?
It guarantees this through protecting its citizens on its own. But yeah, you can buy a pistol if you
No, no, no,
want.
no.
But if
How
you buy,
much does the
I mean, there
state
are
provide?
laws. I mean, so you're not allowed to buy a tank in
No,
some
I'm asking
states.
how much the state is going to provide because you're talking about your perfect minarchist state. It's more practical than anarchy. So how does it figure out how much rights enforcement to provide to each individual? It could provide
Um,
a bunch of tanks to everybody. It could provide me a small military if I wanted, right? You know, let's. I'm just going to give you an arbitrary amount of cash to spend right now.
mhm.
So how much rights enforcement is it providing to each person?
Maybe we'll have a police force protecting the citizens and enforcing the rules and their rights.
And so
So,
how well equipped is
however, our
that police
police and
force going to be?
military goes,
Like, how does it decide how well equipped that police should be? Like, does it give them all like
the
batons or
state does, and actually
rifles?
it's becoming more.
Okay, but how does it
It would.
decide?
How does it decide? Well, if you look at the crime rate to see if the police is doing well enough when they're engaged with the criminal,
So
you
you
know,
look at the
because
crime
like
rate. How do you tell
if you say like
based on the crime rate whether you need to apply more police or less police?
well, because the crime rate typically uh goes up when there's a lack of
Mm-hmm.
enforcement.
But how do you know
So
you're
we need to
lacking and
apply
not
more
you're at
enforcement.
the right amount? So let's take the reduction case of 100% of GDP being allocated towards rights enforcement. Great, you might think, well, there's going to be no rights being violated here, you know, or at least very, very few. But suddenly nobody's farming anymore because everything is going towards rights enforcement. Oops, we seem to have oversupplied rights enforcement. How do we know we're going to go into that scenario?
You're going to have a balanced budget here.
No, how would you figure that out though? How would you balance that budget?
Much is too much. Well, we have to increase it by small
How would you
amounts and
find
see
out if
if.
you're producing too much? How would you find out if you're oversupplying?
Well, if I am over, like, say, if it turns into a police state, I'm pretty sure the population would be protesting that,
So it's
because
if
the
they're
police too
protest. So
much.
if when the population is protesting, that's when you're oversupplying.
In the sense of that, it becomes a like if the state gets ruled by the police, when it turns
I'm not.
from
I'm not even
government rule
like
to
we.
police rule.
This
Yeah,
is not even necessarily like. Let's say they're enforcing only good laws, right? They're only enforcing that you can't murder, you can't steal, you can't rape, you can't do things like this, right? They're enforcing
yeah,
only the best of laws. But how do you know
yeah.
how much to provide the police with to do their job of enforcing rights?
Well, you'll have to see what their job performance is. Like, say, like they're
And how
too
would you measure
slow
that?
getting. Let's say, okay, so let's say there's a crime that happens, and it takes the police, let's say, 50 minutes to get there, and you go to find out why did it take them so long
How do
to
you know that's
get
so
to
long? Like, what if that's the right amount?
it. If they're getting up there and the criminal's gone and there's someone dead in the street, I'd say they weren't quick enough to do their duties. So
So
what? And then you have to
they
fix
have to
that. So
make
you
sure
get
there's
them.
literally no crimes where the criminal gets away. Anything else is
You got to
undersupplying.
improve it. There's never going to be 100%
No,
success
that's the
rate, but if
question.
you
How do you
improve
know?
it,
How do you know what is improvement and what's not improvement? Because you could allocate all means towards rights enforcement, and you're going to enforce rights better and better and better, right? But you're going to be detracting from other places because means are scarce. So you're going to be taking away from every other industry until everybody's starving to death. Nobody's
so
drinking anything. You know.
so that all that stuff like water and food that would be provided by the free market,
Hmm.
because the night watchman state is just about providing protection to its citizens.
Yes, and it's got to centrally plan this protection, so it doesn't know how much to
Oh,
provide.
okay, essentially plan the protection, yeah, but as far as food and water
Yeah, so
goes, no, that's
it
a free
okay,
market.
yes,
So no one would
yes, but
be
that's the point.
starving to death.
How does
No
it
one would
know?
be
How does it know how well it's performing? Because it has no free market counterpart.
is yeah, the private police would still exist under this.
So how much is going to be
There would still
allocated
be
towards the
competition
public
between.
police then, the socialist police?
Well, then we'll look at how the public police fares in performance when compared to the private police. If the private police are doing better, what can we do to make our police
Well, you
perform
could
the
take
same or
money
more
from,
effective?
you could increase taxes and allocate more means towards your own police, but how do you know you're not oversupplying?
Well, we have to look at our costs and expenses. Well,
And what would
are
looking
we
at your costs and
expending too
expenses
much?
divine to you?
Cost of expenses. Well, I don't know. Are we spending too much on cars or whatever?
How do you know you're
We're spending
spending
too.
too
Oh,
much though? Do you see what I'm getting at
we
here? I'm
look at our
getting at the
budget and
high
see what.
knowledge problem. Do you know what that is?
Okay, so listen, the private police do this as well. They say, okay, are we spending too
Hmm.
much on X, Y, or Z?
Hmm.
So we'll see if we're spending on too much on X, Y, or Z. Because
Yep.
if something's not as important, but we're spending more
Private.
money on
That's
the
because private
less
police have a
important.
market, right? If we have fully private police, they have a market.
Yeah.
They can rely on
Then
price
if we
mechanisms.
can't fix our public police, we'll just hire the private police because they've proven
So
themselves worthy.
just let people hire private police is what you're saying.
Hey, people do that already.
Okay, yeah, just
It's
let people
public
hire
police.
private police. Wait a minute. Fuck. Isn't that anarchy? If we're just letting people hire private police. Dag nabbit, we've gone out of statism
No,
again.
it's not. No, it's not.
But how is that
No,
not anarchy if we're just allowing people to,
because there's
hire
still
police
public
if they want to?
police.
So
Still,
how is this?
because
How
people
are you
have the right
funding this
to
public police?
can do it through a tax.
Through the barrel of a gun, where you point at people and say, "Hey, give us money," or
Well, in a minarchist state, we wouldn't send you to jail. We just send you to a different country.
okay, so hey,
Oh,
buddy, if you don't
you don't like our
if you don't
services?
give us money, we're gonna kick you out and send you to Canada.
Well, if you
Send you
want
out
to
to
go to
Gulag.
Canada, but if you want to go to England or if you want to go to France, we'll send you
What
there
if I want to
too.
stay
But
on
we're
my
not going to
damn
lock you up
property?
behind bars.
What if I want to
We're
stay
not
on
going
my
to lock
damn
you up behind
property
bars.
on my ranch in Waco, Texas, and I don't want you to fucking kick me out? Are you gonna invade me?
Pay the tax. Pay the
Pay the
tax.
tax,
It's the same.
or else, eh? How very
Hey, listen.
consensual.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, when you look at it, you can never, with a state or with a business, you can never stay passive 100% of the time. You can have a
It's not about
voluntary tax.
passive. No, you can't. It's
You
about
can. I mean,
aggression.
you could. You could.
No,
I see a lot of
it's a
problems
contradiction
with
in
that.
terms.
It is. I mean, if you listen, I'm saying that I see a lot of issues with it, but it is nevertheless a option. But I'd look at, okay, how much do people make this year? Okay, how much money do I need for the government to operate this
Which you
year?
can't
And
find
then
out
just be
because you
like,
run into the knowledge problem. You can't find out how much you
knowledge
need to
problem.
operate because it's always just, I need this to do what is the question. Well, I need more money if I want to have a bunch of tanks. I need more money if I want
People.
to have an air force. I need more money if I want to have a navy, right?
Mhm.
You can't figure it.
So
It's always going to be an arbitrary level that you're operating at.
we can you don't have to constantly expand to the what's it called, the military industry, or the industrial military's industrial complex. We don't have to do that. We don't have to expand and expand and expand. We just
Hmm.
need a small enough force
But so how are you
to
finding out how
ensure
much you need
peace
to operate?
and
Need towards
security.
what end?
Okay, so like say like we are in between two peaceful states. We wouldn't need a large military. Say if
Okay,
we're in
right, but
between two aggressive
you
states,
said you were gonna figure out how much you need to operate, but need towards what end is the question.
ensure
If you
ensure that we can
need
protect the
to
citizens.
if you protect at what level though? Because you could always protect them better.
Yeah, you could.
Okay, so
And
then
we
you're
just
gonna be
upgrade what we have.
infinitely
We'll just upgrade what we have.
yeah. So then you're gonna have no cap. There's gonna be no upper bound on it, right? Because you can always protect people better than they're currently being protected. Just give them another
That is
tank.
true. That is true.
Yes, so there is no upper bound. So how we figure out what we need. We need infinite money. So we're gonna raise the tax rate to infinity%. Right?
No, that'd be absurd.
I know it's absurd. That's your plan.
It would be absurd. Listen, you gotta be practical about this, okay? You can't tax everyone 100%. Then how are you going to expect
How
people to
would we
buy food?
practical about it though?
Uh, okay, we need. How about we need $1 million to operate
How
this
would you
year?
figure that out?
Okay, so everyone makes an average of, I don't know, an average of 500,000. Let's say we have a population of 5 million. Okay,
I really
we'll
don't think
tax
you're
them
understanding what I'm
a
saying
small
here.
percent of out of everyone. So then we get the $1 million that we need.
Let's say we're talking about good socialist food production instead of good socialist rights enforcement
Oh,
here.
socialism. Oh boy.
You have socialist rights enforcement. That's what you're after here. So we're looking at socialist food production. Right, so how much food do we need to produce? Well, we need enough so everybody's fed. Okay, right.
I,
But fed to what degree? Okay, right. So there is no cap on it. You can always feed them more. And it's like, well, let's just be practical. Okay, let's be practical here. How much food are we allocating to each individual? That's how you get to bread lines, buddy.
but I'm not doing this for. I'm not a command economy. Okay, free market will handle that on its own.
The free market can
Talking
handle rights
about
enforcement on its
providing
own. I agree completely.
military and the police. Okay,
I agree completely. The free market can handle everything on its own. So let's handle rights enforcement on its own as well.
then I guess the state can hire private militaries and private
No, no,
police
no, no.
to
Let's not have the
enforce its own
state
laws.
hire
Yeah, I
things.
can.
Let's
I can.
have,
It
let's just
can. It
leave it up to
can.
the free market where I can hire a private police officer if I want to. I don't have to. I can if I want.
People do
Free
that in the
market
big
police.
cities all the time. There's still the public police, but they hire the private police because they feel they can get better
Well,
protection.
let's still have
Not everyone
let's
can
just have a
afford that.
public option in healthcare, right? Let's have a public option in healthcare. We'll still allow, the private hospitals to operate, but we'll have a public option. Do you agree?
Yeah.
You agree with public option in healthcare?
It won't be big pharma or anything. It's definitely
You
be a
agree,
lot
sorry,
smaller than what the
let's just
U.S.
be
has.
clear. You saying you agree with a public option in healthcare?
Very tiny, yes.
Very tiny. That's an arbitrary level you're going to set it at, and it's because it's a government bureaucracy, it will always grow.
I know, but we can put in constitutional restraints that can actually be
Oh, the
enforced.
Constitution. How about we put in a constitutional restraint saying that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed? Do you think gun rights would ever be infringed if we did that?
You can still own a gun.
Yeah, there'd be no chance of any gun rights being infringed if we did something like that. How about
Well, I
if we
mean, if
said,
people start taking our listen, if
how about if we
anyone
made a
says you're in the
law?
U.S.,
How about if we put into the Constitution another amendment where it said that you have a right to not self-incriminate, right? You can't be a witness against yourself. There'd be no chance at all that there'd be some agency which would form which had you report on your income so that we'd be able to find out if you're evading a tax, right? There'd be no chance of that forming.
yeah.
Wait a minute, hold on. Both of those things happen in the US. We have the IRS and the ATF. The ATF infringes on gun rights. The IRS infringes on the Fifth Amendment with respect to
Can you
self-incrimination. Huh. Wait a minute. But
can
I
you
thought the Constitution
still?
stopped that.
So I have a question. I have a question for you. Okay, can you still buy a gun in the U.S.?
If you're lucky.
Can you or can't you? Can you or can't you?
If you're
Can you buy
lucky.
a gun?
If you're lucky.
You mean if you're lucky?
You can't buy it in
There
New
are more
York.
guns than Americans here in the
Okay.
U.S.
Irrelevant.
We own a lot of guns.
Have you seen that John Stossel video where he tries to buy a gun in New York and they just don't let him? They don't let him. They just say, no,
New
we're not
York
going to give
isn't
you a
the
permit.
entire country. New York
Okay,
isn't the
but
entire
then,
country.
but
You
that
gotta
is
get a
gun rights
permit.
being
Yeah,
infringed
and if
there,
you
right?
want, okay, so having to get a permit, having to prove that you know how to use a gun safely,
That is infringing on the right to bear arms.
an infringement rather than a precaution. Because I don't
It's
want
an
to,
infringement.
buy a gun that I don't know how to
Oh,
operate
you are
and end up shooting
not a
myself in the foot.
minarchist.
You're an ANCAP. You're not a
You're,
minarchist. So don't tell me what a minarchist
neither are
is.
you. You want to have current US gun legislation a public option in healthcare. You're just a regular old statist. You're just like fucking middle of the road, like fucking neocon or whatever.
Neocon.
You're
No,
basically a
no.
Democrat at this point if you're wanting
Yeah.
current gun restrictions. Well, I think people should
Listen,
have some
I'm always for
competency.
less gun restrictions, okay?
Oh
But I
yeah.
do say background check. That's
But
the minimum I'm
you
going.
agree that that
Is
is an
background check.
infringement on the right to bear arms, right?
That's as far as I'm going to go back because
But that's an infringement on the right to bear arms.
everyone can still buy a gun. You just got to do a check.
Okay, but that is an infringement on the right to bear arms. Right? So the Constitution didn't stop that. Neither did the Constitution stop the income tax. The income tax is a direct violation of the Fifth Amendment.
I'm against the income tax.
It's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment did not stop that from happening. It didn't work.
Well, when you have a bunch of lobbyists, listen. When you have lobbyists, I hate.
So,
lobbyists.
Why would you think your Constitution would work, but the U.S. Constitution didn't?
Because we'd outlaw lobbyists, and then we'd arrest any any politician that engage in lobbyism.
So how exactly would you outlaw lobbyists? What would that constitutional amendment look like where you outlaw lobbyists?
Watered down, simplified is that if someone tells you to vote a certain way, exchange they'll pay you cash if you vote that way. That is a very basic term of a lobbyist.
Okay, so right now we're in this theoretical world where I'm like, hey there, Mr. Politician, if you vote this way, I'll give your son a good job at my firm. I've not exchanged any cash with that politician, so I'm not a lobbyist. So that's not against the law.
I mean, I said very simplified, but expanding, yeah, that would fall under lobbyists.
That's the point. That you can never get every every edge case. It's the point of all regulation.
But if you can cut down the vast majority.
No, you're not going to be cutting down the vast majority because we've still got lobbyism then, so we can still move in a direction where that constitutional amendment ain't gonna mean squat in a couple hundred years. Just as shall not be infringed has been ignored, and the Fifth Amendment has been ignored.
Watch what our politicians
both of those are ignored because we have lobbyism. So if you have any lobbyism at all going to get ignored. It's the state trying to regulate itself. It's not going to happen.
Well, the people need to ensure that the state remains regulated. The whole reason why lobbyists became a thing in the first place.
Are we going to get something based where it's Tree of Liberty needs to be watered from time to time? We're going to get something based out of you?
Oh, yeah. Well, remember that when George Washington introduced I believe the tax on whiskey, people viewed that as unjust, and they literally rose up against the government.
Yep, and they failed.
So, actually, fun fact: he removed said law.
They still failed. Didn't rebel. Look at how many taxes we've got today.
Their goal wasn't to overthrow the government. Their goal was to get the state
If
to
only it
drop
was.
the
You know,
taxes,
I'm
and they
actually
did drop the tax.
I'm actually
They
having
did
like
drop it.
I'm actually having like a brain thing here. Wasn't there like some sort of secession movement which happened in the U.S.? I think bloodiest
Oh,
war in
but
history comes to
see
mind.
now that would break natural law. But if you own
Oh, so
slaves,
slavery breaks natural law. So if you're engaging in slavery,
yeah,
that's bad,
yeah,
right?
like natural law is fine as far as it can get put into
Hmm. But
law of a country.
do you realize that both the North and the South engaged in slavery?
Yeah, but the North started to abolish it first. Remember,
No,
free
they
state,
didn't.
slave state. Yeah,
They did not
they
start to
did.
abolish it first. The Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to northern states.
Because
Did you know
those
that?
states have already outlawed
No, no, no. They had
slavery.
not outlawed slavery. There were northern states who had slaves. The Emancipation
Yeah,
Proclamation
those were the compromise
did.
states. So I think
Yeah,
they're
by compromise states, you mean states which allied
yeah,
with Lincoln.
the compromise
The
states
war
because
was
you still had
not
to
about
give up.
slavery. The war was about
Still ended up
northern domination over the South. Here's another
listen,
little
they still gave
factoid.
up their slaves afterwards.
Lincoln instated the Conscription Act, which allows him to enslave people to go to war. That was widespread all over the Union.
No, I'm against conscription.
Yes,
And
so it was clearly not about slavery. It was
it
about
was
northern
about
domination
slavery.
over the South.
If you look at every single southern state that left, it was all over the
Hmm.
perseverance of
Yeah.
slavery.
Do you know why? Because Lincoln used it as a war tactic, and he actually admits this himself. He says, "Well, I don't think this would be constitutional if it wasn't as a war tactic. So I'm going to enact. I'm going to enact that the southern states can't have slaves anymore as a means to economically cripple them." Now is the
Nobody
point.
realized in
That's why he didn't
I believe
apply
it
it to the
was
North,
in
because the North allied with them.
1862, there was this piece of legislation that went to Congress. And if the southern states didn't secede, or at least start seceding, this piece of legislation, I'll have to look it up, potentially would have given the South the right to own slaves, potentially forever. But they were already seceding from their point on, so they didn't have enough votes to
So
get that piece of legislation passed.
yeah, because the North want to instate that the South can't own slaves, but they can. So it's clearly a tactic for economically crippling
They,
the South. Clearly. Because the North, it's a double. How do you not see that this is a double standard? The North owns slaves.
I mean,
They are instating new
not,
legislation to allow them to own more slaves, whilst they're saying that the South can't own any slaves. This is not about slavery.
it is.
Apart from the
It
obtuse
was.
interpretation of that, well, you know, they
To
wanted
the
to ban
North,
slavery for the South, but not for themselves. So then, yeah.
it
But it
would
was
have
just, it
included
was about
every
northern
slave in
domination,
every
not
state.
about, you know,
That
freeing the
legislation
slaves.
was at first to the North, it was about preserving the Union. For the
Yeah,
South,
yeah,
it's about
yeah. So it's
preserving
about
slavery.
preserving the Union. So it's about northern domination over the South.
If the North started this, sure, but the South started it with the bombing of Fort Sumter. And to go
I
even
do
as
not
far as to
care.
say everything else before Sumter, but for the sake of argument, we'll go with Sumter. South fired the first shot. The South started the Civil War over slavery. This is an undisputable fact.
I don't really care if they attacked Fort Sumter
It's a
first, but
lost cause myth.
it
This
was
is a lost
very
cause myth we're
very
going over.
clear that this is not like the anti-slavery side against the pro-slavery side, because both sides were pro-slavery.
North wasn't as entirely. I mean, were there pro-slavery states? Yes, those were the compromise. I believe there were four.
I mean,
Four.
how does
The
it not
rest of the North.
scream that this is not an anti-slavery, a war against slavery, by the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation did not outlaw all slavery, it just outlawed Southern slavery. And furthermore, that the North instated
Because
conscription laws where they can
Lincoln
engage in
then
slavery. The entire North
the
was using conscription. Every single one of them.
Union then introduced legislation that ended slavery
They
in the
didn't.
entire country, not just the South. They did.
They didn't.
They did.
Conscription
You
is
don't
still
see
a
the
thing in the
compromise
US.
states owning slaves today. You don't
Conscription
see the compromised states owning slaves.
Conscription is still a thing in the US.
Conscription, I'm against
slavery.
conscription too. Okay, I never
But
said
it's
I was
slavery.
pro-conscription. I'm against
Right.
slavery. I'm
So they
against
didn't ban
conscription.
slavery
If you
then.
want to say that form of slavery still exists, fine. But as far as racial slavery goes and the plantations for the South,
So it's because it was on black people
by the
that
way,
made it bad.
also the Southerners also instituted conscription as well. It
Yeah,
was highly
because they were
unpopular
also
and caused
slavers.
riots.
I'm not denying that the South were slavers. Of course they were. obviously.
All right. We've reached a
But the
mutual
North were slavers
agreement.
as well. They were both slavers. It was slavers fighting slavers. There's not a
As
war against
far as
slavery.
conscription goes, we can agree, but if you want to
It's
expand
not. It's
past
not
conscription,
just as far as conscription goes, because the Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to the North. So it's also chattel
because
slavery. The North was fine with chattel slavery so long as they allied with the Union.
whatever floats your boat. I've never heard of that system existing in the North. I'll have to do my research into that.
And then you said it. You agreed that it existed in the compromise states, as you called them.
The compromise states were like the same. They owned slaves the same way as the South did, but they wanted to remain a part of the Union.
Yeah, so it was clearly about the Union versus the Confederacy rather than
That's how it
anti-slavery
started.
against slavery.
South started it
Irrelevant.
as the war to prevent. It's not
No, no,
irrelevant.
no. The South
It's the
started
reason
as a
why they
war.
succeeded.
The
It's
South
the
started
reason
as
why
a
they
war to
succeeded.
preserve Southern slavery from Northern banning of it. Right.
Right.
North wanted to ban the South from owning slaves. South said, "Nah,
Yeah.
it's a war
We're a free
tactic."
state,
Lincoln
slave
says
state.
himself that it was a war tactic.
All right. I've never read anything that said that. I'll look into it after the debate's over. Okay.
Sure. I don't have any other hard-hitting questions, I don't think.
What would prevent a minarchist state from propping up in an ANCAP society?
Such a thing would be quite inefficient. I think they might prop up from time to time as ethical regression occurs, but any sort of aggressive force is going to be dealt with by the swift hand of the free market.
So the free market's going to enact aggression against forming state.
Not going to enact any aggression, no.
Okay,
It's going to stop the state's aggression.
So they can exist peacefully,
State by definition is not peaceful.
State in relation with the market.
No, state is going to be enacting itself on people. That's the definition of a state. It's going to rule
But
someone.
these are the people who have chosen to form a government
No.
because they want to be governed. They voluntarily
They do not.
done
You
this.
cannot consent to be ruled.
You can.
It's a contradiction in terms. I cannot consent to be robbed. I cannot consent to be raped. I cannot be consenting to ruling.
Remember the old. There's an old saying here. Ruled by the people.
Yeah, it's
How about
fucking
that?
ridiculous. It's retarded.
I mean, it worked for the longest time before.
No, no. It's a retarded statement. It's never worked.
You choose. You consent to be ruled, and you are able to democratically choose your leader.
Democracy. Do you want to go into democracy then? Democracy, the god that failed. Do you think
Over here in
democracy?
the States, it's not a real democracy, but in America's state, it would be a direct democracy. There wouldn't be no electoral system.
Okay, so you think democracy comes with? Do you think that would output any ethical outcomes when you have democracy?
It can, especially when today the majority of people, especially when you take the United States, are for ethical human rights. So yeah, it can have some ethical output.
Do you
If
think
you were to put the time period further back, like back when the United States was first founded, it probably wouldn't. But in today's world, yes.
Okay, so if democracy can output unethical outcomes, why on earth are you, going to democracy saying, well, democracy would make it all work? Right? If democracy can come out with utterly evil things like gang rape and lynching and whatnot, doesn't seem very, a very good basis for me.
Well, remember here in the States, there's the electoral college that prevented a lot of the possible representative and candidates running for those offices that could have prevented said legislation, but because of the electoral college, they were able to get enough electoral votes to prevent such things from happening.
Do you think a direct democracy then, if you had a perfect direct democracy, do you think that would ever come out with anything abjectly evil?
I mean, it definitely runs the risk too. I mean, anarcho-capitalism runs the same risk.
No, but okay,
everything
right.
runs
But
the same
do
risk.
you think that democracy, there has to be a higher standard then, right, for what is evil and what isn't? What is that standard if it's not natural law?
What is evil? What isn't? That's a natural law. I'm pretty sure
Oh,
natural
so
law, like
natural law. So you agree with natural law, in which case you have to reject the state by definition, because the state
the
is by
state
definition
doesn't have to be
aggressive.
the state doesn't have to be tyrannical.
Of course it does. That's the definition of a state.
It doesn't have to be. And the
Mm-hmm.
definition of a state is a governing body. You can have a governing body full of pacifists.
Yeah. So the McDonald's manager, he's governing what happens on his McDonald's. He's not a state though, is he?
Oh,
What? This is
so
your
you've
warped
accepted
ontology
that
again.
there will be rulers in
No. What?
an ANCAP
When
society.
did I accept that?
Because now the manager, ruling
I
his
didn't say
property.
that. Clip it. I said he governs what happens on his property.
Oh, he governs. Even bigger words. I love this. Government. I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, that's the thing with the term government. I don't really have any strong feelings on how it should be defined, right?
So
But he's deciding what happens.
what gives him the right to govern?
It's his
Because in order to
property.
govern, you have to be governing over someone.
It's his property.
So if someone comes onto your property, they have to follow your rules because you're governing what happens on your land,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. How minarchist of you?
How is that minarchist?
Because this is what a small regulated government does.
Again, I think you are conflating very conveniently covenant communities with states in order that you can say, well, states are always just covenant communities.
Not always. There's
And then, there are all these there are all these states where
plenty of
you're still
states.
defending them, like, well, this state claims that and they claim that other thing. So you can just kind of wave in and out of natural law with no care for where you're going, really.
Yeah, because there's practical uses of natural law, but then there's philosophical uses
Oh,
of
practical
natural law.
uses. How do you define when it's a practical use?
So give me a random.
Well, I'm asking how you determine when something is a practical use of natural law and when it's an
Can it be
impractical
used
use.
in today's society effectively?
Natural law can
Without
always be used
without
in today's
contradiction.
society without contradiction. It's necessarily non-contradictory.
Okay, so it's not contradictory, and you say it can 100% be used.
Mhm.
In today, okay. So, in Somalia was covered in anarchy. War. Why did
I don't think it was covered in anarchy, but
Yeah, the parts of
natural
it
law
that
did
were.
apply.
Oh, it did.
It did
did,
apply.
so-
Natural law applies to every single human.
Okay, so why didn't they apply natural law then when they had no government for the brief
Because they're a
time period
bunch
they
of
did?
fucking criminals.
Okay, but it's an anarchist society. How do you
It's a
determine it's a
non-anarchist
criminal?
society.
It was.
It wasn't.
Was.
There were a bunch of fucking warlords who each carved out a bit of
yeah.
territory for themselves.
Yeah, there were warlords, but there were parts of it that were like it was anything goes.
Sure. So in those parts, there might have
been.
been temporary anarchy. Just as there'd be anarchy in the middle of fucking Siberia, where the Russian government doesn't really care about.
Why was it temporary? Why was it temporary?
Because people came and conquered.
Because people conquered, or is it because a ruler just popped up and people chose to follow him? That happened
Yeah,
too.
and
How
then
does
they
a warlord
conquered
start?
people. So some people chose to follow that guy in order to rule other people.
So if you're willing to follow a warlord, why can't
I mean,
they follow
I can
a
agree to
peaceful
help
ruler?
you murder a guy. Doesn't mean we're not doing anything wrong. It's the whole
That is-
so isn't there somebody you forgot to ask meme.
What did I forget to ask you?
No, I'm saying it's like the meme where it's like, well, isn't there somebody you forgot to ask? Well, it's like, if I'm going on fucking like, my gang of friends are going beating people up. All my friends agree to do this, but that mean it's consensual.
You're comparing a state to a gang.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what they are. They're a gang of fucking criminals.
I mean, are they very corrupt? Yeah, I'd go to say there's plenty of criminals that operate within our government.
I think the state is necessarily criminal. It's an institution of crime.
an institution of crime, but
Yep.
it locks up violent offenders, violent
Sometimes it
criminals,
does that. Other times it goes,
rapists.
what the fuck? You have a plant in your pocket? You're going to jail, kid.
Yeah,
And then they beat you to death,
yeah.
right?
Well, a minarchist state wouldn't do that. A minarchist state would be like, hey, as long as
Oh,
you're not being violent, as long
right.
as you're not
So the
violent,
minarchist state would adhere
you don't go to
100% to
prison.
natural law, would it? I'm sorry, buddy. You
Yes.
got anarchy right there. If it's adhering to natural law, you got anarchy.
Okay, but then if someone's being violent, they go to prison. Is that natural
Okay.
law? Is that natural law?
Under natural law, you have proportionality. So if I punch you, the just punishment for me punching you is you can force me into this punishment if I'm resisting. You can arrest me and force me to do under the punishment. But the punishment would be a retribution where I can trade this right of retribution to someone else, where they're allowed to punch the person back. And then there's also the restitution, where they have to pay me for whatever damages are incurred in the punching.
Mhm.
So that's
But
natural law.
who determines that?
That's
Who
proportionality.
determines that? If
It's
this is an
entirely
anarchist
based on
society, who
logic.
determines?
It's entirely based on logic. The logic of
Well,
conflict.
there's a lot of people who don't follow logic nowadays. So
Okay, and
what
that'd
about
be in
those who are
violation of natural
illogical?
law. Whether you agree with the logic is irrelevant. Whether people agree that 1 plus 1 is 2 is irrelevant to whether 1 plus 1 is 2.
So then, who has the authority to
It's not a person.
determine?
A person isn't
Oh,
deciding what natural law is. You derive
no, no,
it.
not no, determining how to apply it in an anarchist society. Because, like, say, like I
Anybody
hit
can.
you. Say
Anybody
I
can,
let's
as long as they're following natural law, it's fine. Do you mind if I just go to the toilet real quick whilst you hold that? I thought I'll be back in a second. If you're still there. Okay. See you in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he's fucking gone. Okay. That's unfortunate. I was having fun. I was just about to fucking demolish him with natural law. Again. Oh well. Guess that'll be it for me then. See you later.